But Brandon, let's move on into our final topic, looking at one of your favorite I was going to be realistic, but let's be jokingly. It's your favorite conference. You love this conference. You stay up late every single Saturday just to watch these games on the West Coast.
That's why I'm tired all the time.
That's why you're always tired. You're always watching your Pac-12 football. And we're looking specifically at the Pac-12 North. And the reason why we're looking at the North is because
there's no reason to look at the South.
Well, I mean, the South is interesting only because it's USC's to lose. And I don't think they're going to lose it, however they could. However, in the North...
They've tried.
In the North, we had Washington go down to the Sun Devils. We had Cal defeat Washington State. And now, because of those two upsets, we kind of have a three-dog race in the Pac-12 North. We've got Stanford 4-1, half-game lead. They're technically at the top. Then 3-1 in the conference, the Huskies. 3-1 in the conference, the Cougars. Brandon, I'm just going to be frank and ask it out to you. Which one of these teams, Stanford, Washington, Washington State, which one will win the Pac-12 North the rest of the year?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I want to say Washington, but they, to me, have a difficult schedule coming up throughout the rest of the season. They have to go and they have to play against UCLA on the 28th. So that's not this weekend. That's in 2 weekends. They're off this weekend, and that's got to be tough because you're still stewing. Got to be stewing after that horrible loss to Arizona State. So then you're going to be home against UCLA in a couple of weeks. Then you're home against Oregon, on the road at Stanford, home Utah, home Washington State. These are some tough games. We saw how close Utah played USC. And if they would have just gone for the extra point to tie it up,
they would have maybe won in overtime.
There's a chance. There's a chance. I'm not saying they would have, but there's a chance.
I said maybe.
But they played so well. Utah did against that USC team. Stanford has showed that they've been good. Washington State has been up and down. I think that for me, the two teams that I would be nervous of are, surprisingly, UCLA and then Stanford. So I am still going to go with Washington to win this, but it really is anyone's division to win. I mean, Stanford, quite simply, they can't lose again. They can't lose again.
I think they could.
I don't think so.
I'm not saying they will and still win it. They could, though, and this is why. I think Stanford's my favorite right now. I am going to say Stanford, I think, wins the Pac-12 North, and this is why. First off, they get a bye week this week coming up. Then they play Oregon State. Should be, I'm saying should be. I think it can happen, but should be an easy win on a Thursday night for them in Beaverton, Oregon. Then you get the two tough ones at Washington State, at Washington. Then you play Cal. All you got to do, and it's easier said than done, do your business against the Beavers, do your business against the Bears. Then at the worst, split between the Washingtons. Because here's the tough part. You were mentioning UCLA. The team I don't like, and they both play both Washington teams, is the team that you mentioned first, the Utes. We first time on the podcast, we're talking two Utes because they play the Huskies and then they play the Cougars. They both play these teams, and the funny thing about it, it's November 11th, the Washington State Cougars get Utah. Then they get a week off, and then they play the Huskies on the road. The 18th, the Huskies get Utah, and then they play the week after the Cougars at home. So both these teams get a stab at Utah before playing each other. All that Stanford needs, obviously, if they win out, they'll win the whole Pac-12 North. But I like Stanford because they could lose one of the games against Washington, and then basically it's whoever... If one of them loses to Utah, the other one just needs to lose to each other, and they could win. I'm saying like that's a ton of stuff that needs to happen. I like the Stanford team. I like what they've done. Like ever since we've mentioned the guy Bryce Love, he's been going off. Like he's been having himself a little bit of a year. I still think Saquon Barkley wins the Heisman. I don't think Love's a Heisman candidate, but I like this Stanford team, and I think that they are a dark horse late in this year because no one expected them to be leading the Pac-12 North this part of the year. Everyone expected Washington to be at the top, probably undefeated.
Well, here's the thing I think with Stanford is that they're going to beat Oregon State. They're going to beat Oregon State.
Big or close? Big league, small league?
They're going to kill them.
Okay,
they're going to kill
so
them.
not a Syracuse-Clemson game?
No, it's Oregon State. Okay. It's on the road, but Oregon State, come on now. So Washington, they're definitely going to have competition against. I think UCLA. I know. I think it's. Some people are going to think that's silly, but I think they're going to have competition there. I think they'll probably still end up winning that game. They'll beat Oregon. Stanford, I think Washington beats, but Utah is going to be a tough one. Washington State, I think they'll beat. So I think it's really going to come down to that Utah game because I think Washington, they're better. I don't have a lot of respect for the Pac-12. I think that's pretty clear. But
that's why I said it's your favorite conference.
I don't. They're weak. But I think that when it comes down to it, it's going to be that Utah game. They are not as bad, Washington, as what they showed against Arizona State. They are not that bad to lose 13-7, to only score 7 points, and to lose to Arizona State. Not that bad. But that Utah game is the one that would scare me the most because of what Utah was able to do against USC.
Don't forget, only a 3-point loss to Stanford the game before.
And I was going to say, and I understand that that USC game and that USC team is not as good as what it was last year. Certainly, we've seen that. They've found ways to win, but they're certainly not doing it in the same style they did last year. But Utah's going to be tough. Washington State is they're ranked 15th, but generously, they have not played that well this season. Stanford, they've been a kind of an up and down team. For me, Washington beats them. They will have an interesting game with Utah, and that's what's going to be, I think, the deciding factor.
Well, and that's the thing that's the main reason why right now at this point, when we're recording this on October 16th, I like Stanford because when you look at their schedule, they only have, they've got Notre Dame at the end of the year, but the good thing about Notre Dame, you can lose that and it's not going to affect your Pac-12 standing.
I know it's not going to impact your Pac-12 standing.
That's a playoff thing at that point. If you're going into that game knowing you have won the North, that is a game to where we win this, then we win the Pac-12 title, and then we're in the playoff conversation. That's what that game could mean, but you got to win the North first.
But that's also what I'm saying too is that them winning the North is like Joe Blow winning the American. No one cares, and it doesn't matter. But I think that that's why if they lose to Notre Dame in that last game, they may have won their side, but they're not necessarily going anywhere. That's what I'm saying.
You got to win that game to even be in the playoff talk. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. And I know someone's going to say, well, if they still win their side in the North and then they win the Pac-12 title game, they're still going to be in the playoff talk, but you won't because there's going to be someone who is stronger than you, somebody somewhere else in another Power 5.
Well, and now with everything that so far, we talked about it in the first segment, so far what happened this past week, we're having this conversation because of Arizona State, because of Cal. That's the only reason we're having this conversation right now of what happened last week. Clemson goes down. Washington goes down. Washington State goes down. We had a ton of other teams. Auburn, didn't forget about you. You guys all. You know what's the funny thing about Auburn that I didn't say earlier? I told you this before we're recording, but I'm telling you again so they can hear. The Auburn mascot dressed up like the Troy Trojan. And we're mocking LSU up 20, and then they blew a 20-0 lead. I kind of found that hilarious.
I think that's hilarious.
But the thing I like with Stanford schedule-wise is, like you said, Oregon State they should beat. And of the teams not named Washington, I know Cal beat Washington State, and people are going to say, well, you can't sleep on Cal. They beat the Cougars, so they can beat the Cardinals. I am not that afraid of Cal like I would be of Utah. And that is a team, both the Huskies and both the Cougars need to play. And the big thing for me, a big question, and you even sent me a text about it, about the Cal game on Friday night, was you sent me a text, you're like, man, Luke Falk does not look good. 5 interceptions, no touchdowns. Can't have a game like that if they need to win.
Did you hear after the game, reporters were talking to him, he said, I just don't know if I have it anymore.
So he said, Big Ben did.
I'm kidding. He didn't say that. But
the Big Ben syndrome. It's going around nowadays. It's going around like a bug.
But that's why I think Stanford and Washington are the ones. I would actually not even put Washington State in there, because Washington State has not, to me, they should have lost earlier in the season when they played not San Diego State, but Boise State. They should have lost that game. Boise State let them right back in it and let them win it. And then they didn't look good at all against a Cal team that actually has shown some glimpses. They showed a little bit against USC, but USC was able to pull away, get the win. But that doesn't mean that Cal is all of a sudden this team that's going to go out and beat everybody the rest of the season. But Washington State, I think, is the weakest of the three of them. I think Washington is the strongest of the three of them. Stanford is a sneaky one, especially because they're right now currently at 4-1. They all have one loss. That's not going to be how it ends up.
Let me ask you.
It's Stanford and Washington. It does come down to that Stanford-Washington game on November 10th. But then I think for Washington, they've got to be able to play well against Utah, which is the game right after that.
Let me ask you this, and this is kind of just for Washington. The 13-7 loss to Arizona State. Are you seeing that as a fluke? Was that a fluke that Jake Browning only 17 of 30 for 139 yards, no touchdowns? You got Gaskin only 67 yards in that game. Was that a fluke, or could a team in the Pac-12 come in and play defensively strong like the Sun Devils did and upend the Huskies again?
I think that was a fluke. I really do. I think that was a fluke, because when you go through the Cal game, they won 38-7. They won 38-7. Won that with ease. Oregon State 42-7. Colorado 37-10. That was a fluke. That was a fluke. It was a very, very bad fluke, but a fluke nonetheless.
And the thing I want to look at, they last year, no, I'm looking at 2015. I don't know why my computer did that. I wanted to look at 2016. 2016, they're almost going to do the same thing they did in 2016, except the loss came later. They started off 9-0. Everyone was talking about Washington. Could they be a playoff team? And then they go ahead, lose to Southern Cal. Then they go ahead, whomp on Arizona State. They whoop the Cougars, and then they completely bulldozed the Buffalo. But that game, I will say, we'll go back to that quarterback decision with I wouldn't have put in the injured quarterback from the first half into that game. He lost them the game with that interception to start the second half. I'm going to get off it. They beat Colorado. That was basically it. Washington can do that again. Just because this team has one loss right now doesn't mean they're dead in the water. And I am with you. If there's any team, not like, obviously I said I think Stanford's going to do it, but if I had to pick someone else, I would go with the Huskies, only because they have the team, they have the coach that has been here before. Like, if I'm Coach Peterson, I'm in that locker room going, guys, this happened last year. This is the same exact thing that happened last year. We lost a tough game to a Trojan team that was going nowhere last year. Going absolutely nowhere. What did we do? We rebounded. And the good thing for them, UCLA, could be a trap game, but UCLA not playing like they were at the beginning of the year. Oregon, better team with Willie Taggart. However, don't think they have the stuff to hang on. The big thing for Washington, and it comes down to kind of a similar thing we looked at Penn State. Washington has 3 games. The only difference, theirs are at the end of the season, where they have to go through a gambit. They have to play Stanford on the road. Then they have to play Utah, which will be a tough opponent. Utah plays the top teams in this conference tough. They played Stanford tough. They played the Trojans tough. And then they got to play the Cougars. And the Cougars, yes, you could say, well, the Huskies will win it, but the only way I give the Cougars a chance in that game is because it's a rivalry game, and anything can happen in a rivalry game. Could be a blowout, could be a close one, or could be an upset. And that's the thing with the Huskies that scares me, is they've got 3 teams to go through, whereas Stanford only has 2. 2 tough ones, I should say, to go to. So I'm going to say Stanford is my team right now. If I had to pick one, you're going with the Huskies as your team, right?
Yeah.
This is where you guys come in. Let us know who you guys take to win the North down below in the comment section. And also, kind of a follow-up question for all you Pac-12 fans out there. Tell my big boy over here why he should start watching Pac-12 football. Let him know.
Oh, they're gonna let me know
why he should stay up a little later to watch some of these games and not wait for the highlights. Let Brandon know.
Maybe it would be more interesting if your teams played when other college football teams should be playing Saturday, not Friday.
It's kind of like baseball. I had to watch the Cub game they started at 6. They started. At
obviously, as fans, you guys
Eastern.
can't control that.
Yeah, they started at 7:30 Eastern on the East Coast. But you think about it, that was a 4:30 start for a baseball game on the West Coast because they were playing in an Eastern time zone.
Yeah,
a 4:30 start locally. It was like a mid-afternoon game, not even a night game for them. But you guys, let us. We're not talking baseball. We're talking football. Let us know who's going to win the Pac-12 North down below in the comments section.